Randolph Scott remains one of Hollywood's most enduring figures, a name synonymous with strength, honor, and quiet heroism. Born George Randolph Scott on January 23rd, 1898, in Orange County, Virginia, he rose to prominence during a transformative period in American cinema. Over a career that stretched from the silent film era into the early 1960s, Scott became a defining presence in Western films, shaping how generations viewed the classic American hero. His tall frame, calm demeanor, and restrained performances offered something rare in Hollywood: a sense of authenticity. Scott did not rely on flamboyance or excess. Instead, he conveyed integrity through stillness and moral certainty. Audiences trusted him, not just as an actor, but as a symbol. Long after his retirement, his films continue to resonate, reminding viewers of a time when character mattered more than spectacle, and when quiet resolve spoke louder than words. Early life and formative years. Raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, Randolph Scott grew up in a stable, well-connected household that valued discipline, education, and personal responsibility. His father, George Grant Scott, worked as a certified public accountant, while his mother, Lucille Crane Scott, managed the home and nurtured her children with care and structure. Scott attended private schools and later enrolled at the Georgia Institute of Technology, initially pursuing engineering. His education reflected a practical mindset rather than artistic ambition. However, World War I altered the course of his life. Enlisting in the US Army, Scott served in France with a trench mortar unit. Although he did not experience frontline combat, military life instilled discipline, patience, and maturity. These traits would later define both his screen presence and personal conduct. When he returned home, Scott carried with him a deeper understanding of duty, resilience, and quiet strength. Finding his way to Hollywood after the war, Scott briefly returned to North Carolina, but restlessness soon set in. Like many young men of his generation, he was drawn west by opportunity and possibility. Encouraged by his family, he moved to California during the early 1920s, when Hollywood was rapidly emerging as the heart of the entertainment industry. Scott enrolled in acting classes and began working as an extra, slowly learning the craft from the ground up. His height, athletic build, and composed demeanor quickly attracted attention. Early roles were small, but they provided valuable experience. A turning point came when influential director Cecil B. DeMille noticed Scott's potential and cast him in minor but meaningful roles. These early appearances helped Scott transition smoothly into sound films. Gradually, studios began to recognize that his natural presence was ideally suited for westerns, a genre that would soon define his career. Becoming a Western icon. By the 1930s and 1940s, Randolph Scott had firmly established himself as one of Hollywood's most dependable leading men, particularly in Western films. Movies such as Jesse James, Western Union, and The Last of the Mohicans showcased his ability to command the screen without exaggeration. What distinguished Scott was not flashy heroics, but restraint. His characters were principled men facing difficult moral choices, often torn between justice and survival. Audiences found this relatable and reassuring during uncertain times. Scott's calm authority, paired with his physical presence, made him the embodiment of the Western hero. He represented fairness, self-reliance, and quiet courage. Unlike many stars, he avoided reinventing himself for trends, instead refining a consistent image rooted in integrity. This consistency helped him remain relevant for decades and earned him enduring respect among fans and filmmakers alike. The Bud Boetticher years. One of the most respected chapters of Scott's career came in the 1950s through his collaboration with director Bud Boetticher. Together, they created a series of lean, character-driven westerns that are now regarded as classics. Films such as 7 Men from Now, The Tall T, and Ride Lonesome stripped the genre to its emotional core. These stories focused less on spectacle and more on consequence, revenge, and moral ambiguity. Scott's performances during this period were notably mature, portraying men shaped by loss, regret, and experience. His characters were no longer idealized heroes, but deeply human figures navigating harsh realities. The simplicity of these films allowed Scott's subtle acting to shine. Today, this collaboration is considered one of the most influential partnerships in Western cinema, inspiring filmmakers who value storytelling rooted in character rather than excess. A private and grounded personal life. Despite his fame, Randolph Scott lived a remarkably private and grounded life. He valued stability, faith, and routine over Hollywood glamour. Scott married twice, ultimately building a long-lasting family life with his second wife, with whom he adopted 2 children. Away from the camera, he was known as soft-spoken, polite, and deeply respectful of others. He avoided public controversies and rarely gave interviews, preferring to let his work define him. Friends described him as thoughtful and reserved, someone who found contentment in simple pleasures like golf and quiet evenings at home. His Christian faith played an important role in his life, guiding his values and charitable efforts. In an industry often marked by excess and exposure, Scott's discretion stood out. He demonstrated that success did not require constant attention, only consistency, humility, and personal conviction. Choosing a graceful exit. In 1962, Randolph Scott made a decision that surprised many. He retired from acting at the height of his respect and popularity. His final film, Ride the High Country, directed by Sam Peckinpah, was a fitting farewell. The movie explored aging, honor, and the passing of an era, themes that mirrored Scott's own transition. Rather than extending his career unnecessarily, he chose to leave with dignity. Retirement allowed him to reclaim privacy and enjoy the life he had carefully built. Scott remained active through community involvement, philanthropy, and recreational golf. He also proved to be a shrewd businessman, managing his investments wisely. Unlike many actors who struggle after leaving the spotlight, Scott embraced retirement fully. His choice reinforced his lifelong pattern, knowing when to step forward and when to step away, always on his own terms. Reflections revealed after his passing. Following Randolph Scott's death in 1987 at the age of 89, reflections from those close to him offered a deeper understanding of the man behind the image. Among his personal effects was a private note intended for family and close friends. Rather than scandal, the note expressed introspection. Scott reflected on the emotional cost of a life lived under public expectations and the loneliness that can accompany fame. He acknowledged missed moments and the difficulty of fully expressing oneself while maintaining a carefully guarded public identity. The note was not a confession of wrongdoing, but a human reflection on restraint, sacrifice, and the complexity of private emotions. It revealed vulnerability without diminishing his character. For many, this quiet honesty added depth to Scott's legacy, reminding audiences that even the strongest figures carry unseen burdens and inner struggles. Reconsidering Hollywood's golden age. The reflections attributed to Scott have encouraged broader conversations about the pressures faced by actors during Hollywood's golden age. Studios tightly controlled images, careers, and personal boundaries. Privacy was often a survival strategy rather than a choice. For Scott and many of his contemporaries, authenticity had to coexist with expectation. The culture of the time allowed little room for deviation from accepted norms, leaving many stars emotionally guarded. Understanding this context helps modern audiences view Scott with greater empathy. His restraint was not coldness, but caution. His silence was not emptiness, but protection. By recognizing these realities, his life becomes not less heroic, but more human. His story stands as a reminder that fame often demands compromise, and that personal truth is sometimes postponed, not abandoned. A legacy. Strengthened by humanity today, Randolph Scott's legacy endures not only through his films, but through a deeper appreciation of his humanity. His Western heroes remain timeless symbols of courage and principle, but his personal reflections remind us that strength and vulnerability coexist. Scott's life teaches that dignity is found in consistency, and courage is often quiet. He navigated fame without losing himself, even when it required sacrifice. By stepping away when the time was right, he preserved both his image and his peace. His story encourages reflection on authenticity, patience, and self-respect. In the end, Randolph Scott is remembered not just as a cinematic legend, but as a man who lived thoughtfully, worked honestly, and left behind a legacy enriched by truth, restraint, and enduring grace.